My guest on this week's episode of Suds Search is Crystal Carter, head of SEO Communications at Wix. Crystal is an in-demand conference speaker who has been presenting everywhere, it seems, in the past year. You may have heard her talk at MozCon, the Women in Tech SEO Fest, Brighton SEO, SMX, and many other places. I caught up with Crystal shortly after she gave one of the most popular talks at this year's MozCon. Her presentation was about visual search, which is not to be confused with image search. Crystal does an excellent job of describing not just how far the technology has come, but also what opportunities await savvy marketers who take advantage of visual search. Crystal and the team at Wix have made deep inroads to the SEO community. If you work in SEO and haven't checked out Wix in a few years, I encourage you to give it another look. They are doing some really impressive things. I'm going to ask Crystal about some big news out of Wix recently, which was the launch of the Wix SEO Hub. The Wix SEO Hub is an online learning center with articles and videos created by Crystal and some of the top SEOs in the world. All of the content is free, and it's really well done. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Crystal Carter. We'll talk about how marketers can leverage visual search. We'll talk about the killer team being assembled at Wix, and we'll spend a little time talking about the rapper Exhibit, the Ghostbusters car, and the Statue of Liberty. All right, Crystal Carter, welcome to Suds Search. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited to talk to you. I wanted to start out by finding out everything that's going on at Wix. One of the big things that I heard about is the new Wix SEO Hub. As far as I can tell, this is a totally free guide to everything from basic SEO to on-site SEO, reporting, and everything in between. So, like I said, I think this is free, and you don't have to be a Wix customer to go into it. How can people find out more?
So yeah, if you go to wix.com/SEO/learn, you can see the Wix SEO Hub, and we've got lots of great articles there, and we're adding more all the time. And we also have our webinars, and we also have some videos there as well. And you're completely right. This isn't something that is under the Wix, underneath the sort of paid area. It's completely free. There's a lot of advice, like great advice from some fantastic SEOs. So we recently published an article from Michelle Fortin. We have articles from Chima Menje, articles from Maddie Osman, who recently just published a fantastic SEO book, from myself, from Morty Oberstein, from George Wynn, our editorial person, our editorial director, sorry. It's full of lots of great SEO insights, from beginner sort of things like what is a header tag to sort of more thinking about the sort of next iteration of Google and how search has evolved and that sort of element. And then we've got some more sort of timely pieces. So Morty Oberstein shared some recent things about the recent Google algorithm update. And we have some strategic pieces as well for text content. And we also have webinars. So we do a monthly webinar series. And we did a webinar yesterday all about homepage SEO, which is a topic that I love because it always has an impact and a lot of people overlook it. I've audited so many sites where they don't even have an H1 on the homepage, and it infuriates me. Yeah, Mark, you've been there. You've seen these sites. And it just seems like, why aren't you doing this? This is so easy. Just do this. Right. So we had a great webinar on that yesterday. We had or time of recording, and we've got a monthly webinar rolling. We've got some great guests lined up for the rest of the year. So we're really excited, and we're really excited about making sure that SEO is really accessible for lots of different audiences, and that we're able to speak to lots of different user requirements with regards to learning more about SEO.
Well, that you summarized it really well. But one of the things that I heard there is like you've assembled this team of like SEO pros that are not just people who work at Wix. There's people who work at different places as well. They're all contributing to this hub, and they're like top of the food chain SEOs and stuff like that. How did you guys assemble this SEO Dream Team, and how did this come about?
So we got the Tesseract, and we decided that we needed to get. No, I'm kidding.
Did you kidnap these people, Crystal?
No, we did. We asked everyone very, very kindly and
Okay.
things. I think we as a team, so our core team for Wix SEO with regards to the sort of outreach element is myself, Morty Overseen, and George Wynn. And we as a team are very much like very proud and very engaged with the SEO community. We all genuinely love SEO. If something happens, like we will talk about all of what's going on with it. We want to know what's going on with it. We want to see how it's happening. You know, we want to be involved in the conversations. You know, I've talked to different partners around the world, and when I talk to them about, you know, why we're doing what we're doing, it's because we really love SEO. Like we really
Yeah.
genuinely love SEO. And we're part of a team, a wider team. Like we are the tip of the SEO iceberg at Wix. Like there's literally a Slack channel with like 200 people all doing
Wow.
SEO and all checking on SEO and all doing this. So, you know, we recently announced an image sitemap update. And you know, this it was like, oh, the image sitemap update is rolled out, and everyone's like, yeah, like boom emojis and like all of this sort of stuff, and everybody's really hyped about it in the Slack channel. And then someone's like, oh, I found a thing, we should fix that as well. And we're like, yeah, we'll fix that. I'll raise to Jira. Okay, that's all sorted. Yeah, awesome. Everybody, like literally everybody's so hyped about every SEO update that we make. And Wix is working so hard, like round the clock, and to just do awesome things. So our head of SEO, Nati, is you know, he calls himself the czar of SEO, and like he makes sure that everyone across Wix is doing good SEO. Like he's not kidding.
Yeah.
And you know, he has reports. He'd be a great guest to actually talk about how he does it at scale,
No, for sure.
because it's incredible. He showed me this dashboard, and I was like, you do what? And he was like, yeah, we have a scorecard. And I was like, how do you score? He's like, we have a scorecard. And I was like, that's immense.
Awesome.
Yeah. So he's incredible. And we are literally just like, we just make them look good. And it's really not hard because they're doing really great stuff all the time. So because we have such enthusiasm for SEO, and because we work, like I'm very involved in the Women in Tech SEO group, like love that. Like they're my homies all the time. Big up Women in Tech SEO. Morty runs SEO Chat. He also has an SEO podcast. You know, he's really involved with the SEO community there. George worked at you know, one of the biggest SEO publications you know, in the world for many years. We are able to, I believe, we're able to engage with some great SEO experts because we really appreciate their expertise. And I think, and I hope that's clear. And that's certainly what we try to bring to Wix users and to the wider SEO community.
Oh, I love it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Like there was a time not that long ago where you would think of, as an SEO, you'd think of Wix as like, you know, avoid it. You know, that was kind of the idea. And then it's today it's really changed. Wix
Yeah,
is
I
very
sometimes say,
active.
like, you know, Wix is turning 16 this autumn. And
Yeah.
basically, like, you know, we had an awkward phase, but we're going to the prom now. Like, that's what's up.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
and people have worked really hard on it. And I think the other thing is that, like, in SEO, like, we love a growth story. In SEO, I don't know how many times, like, you know, as an SEO, you've had some client come to you and you're like, you are a diamond in the rough. We can
Right.
do good stuff here.
Right.
Like if I just like do this and do that. And that's essentially what the SEO team has done. Like Nati came in and like he's done so many things there. And not behind like who runs the SEO products and make sure that the SEO products are working really well. She, you know, they QA everything. They roll out we publish some of the updates on Twitter and stuff, and we'll say, okay, we're rolling out, we have this, and it's gone out to this thing, and they'll and we're constantly like, is it ready yet? And they're like, no, we've rolled
Yeah.
it out to part way, we're testing it, we're QAing it. Oh, hang on, we're going to check it again. Like there's so much data that goes into deciding whether or not something is ready to go, something is you know, is going to be good for our users. I think talking about Nati, one of the things I'm always like, oh, I found this cool thing, there's this great new SEO thing, we should totally do this thing. And he's like, how does it help our users? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you know, it's like cool. He's like, yeah, but how does it help our users? And I'm like, well, but you know, he's like, but how does it help the users do better SEO? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I will come back with some notes on that.
Right.
Like it's not just some cool thing that's
I
fun.
love it.
That we, you know, there, it's all very considered, because I think one of the other things about Wix, it's really interesting. And one of the things that I love about working with the team is that we're working on the micro and the macro at the same time. So we have lots of people who are self-creators who, build their own website themselves, or are, our Wix partners who are working with other people to build websites. So I was talking to a Wix partner this week who has done a phenomenal job with their client. They're ranking, like they're ranking within 3 months for like national keywords and stuff, and they're doing really well. And he's got such care for his clients, and I just love seeing that, because I know that as when I was working with clients directly, like there are some clients that you just really adore and you just really want them to do so well, and I could see that in him, and I really appreciate that. And so we're working with people who are working on that level, but also Wix is also like, there's 200 million users on Wix. We're it's massive,
It's like a
and
huge
people say,
country.
oh,
Yeah.
it's not, yeah, exactly. And we have data centers and cloud, it's all in the cloud, and it's all over the world. So if somebody logs on to your website in Chicago, let's say you're on a Wix site, I hope you will be soon. But let's say you're on a Wix site in Chicago and somebody logs on to your website from Mumbai. They will get the information for that website from a data server that's near to them. And they're all over the place. Our Wix engineering site, they are like, they're so epic. So they have like 99.98% uptime. And the other day I posted something and I was like, oh yeah, we have 98.8. They were like, it's 98.98. I was like, my bad, I'm sorry. So our uptime is epic. And there was at the beginning of the year, there was an AWS server outage. And basically, like, Wix was unbothered because Wix has like stacks on stacks. We've got our own servers, we've got AWS, we have some Google servers as well. So like the AWS problem happened and we just switched. And like there's that whole ecosystem that goes into making sure the network is really, really secure, really fast, as fast as we can get it. Where our Core Web Vitals come out every month, or like that chart comes out every month, and we're like, yeah, we did it in Japan. Yeah, we did it. Like, honestly, yeah, we're like top again, like that sort of thing.
I can
So
picture the high fives already. Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, seriously, like we're such big nerds. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love it. I love the momentum you guys have gotten. So keep up the good work. But I want to shift gears into MozCon. It was at all the way back 14 days ago, or earlier this month or something like that. Was MozCon.
So long ago.
Feels like such a long time ago. But you had a really interesting topic, visual search. At first I was like kind of reading through your slides, and at first I'm like, well, this seems like something that's on the horizon, maybe something that will happen in the future. Over the course of studying this, we might be off and running with visual search right now. How would you describe visual search in the current moment as we sit here today?
So there's a couple of things. I wrote a blog about for Moz about this. And also I did my talk on this as well. There's also a Twitter thread on this as well. So I've done a bit of this, and I also did a blog for Moz at the beginning of the year about this topic as well. Basically, what I would say is that a lot of people think that visual search, and a lot of the research that I was reading when I was studying this was saying, oh yeah, to optimize for visual search, you just use like image attributes like alt tags and alt text, and you'll be fine. And I was like, no, like that's part of it, but that's not what visual search is. Visual search is image recognition. It's basically Google recognizing the different entities and different elements within the image. And I got into visual search because of my kid. Like, we'd be out and he'd be like, what's that butterfly, Mom? And I'd be like, I don't know. I have no idea. So I would take a picture of it and I'd search it on Google Lens, and they'd be like, that is a peacock butterfly. And I'd be like, darling, that's a peacock. And he'd go, oh, Mom, you're so smart. And I go, oh, thank you very much. And so I started learning more about it as a user, and the stuff I was reading about it wasn't tallying. And basically the difference between image search and visual search is that with image search, you're trying to match the image to a text query. So I would enter like butterfly with blue wings. And then I would get an image that had attributes or had copy on the page or had other
Right.
signals, text-based signals that said, butterfly blue wings, la la la, and that would show up in the image search. What happens on a visual search is I would take a picture of the butterfly with blue wings, and then Google would give me back the most relevant information based on what they can see from that. So they will interpret, the entity that they can see, which is a butterfly. They'll interpret the color of it. They might interpret some of the peripheral things around it, like whether it's like in leaves or whether it's next to a stream. And then they'll think about like matching it to visual. They have visual matches. And then they also have other things. So they can also parse things like, so different entities like the butterfly. They can parse text, logos, and also landmarks. And so when you take the picture of the butterfly, Google takes the information and they process it through all of their different data points, through all and everything that they can recognize from that image, so they can figure out that it's a butterfly, la la la, and then they will give you information that matches that. It might be a YouTube video, it might be an image, it might be a shopping query, it might be whatever. But the thing that's interesting about visual search and that I find really interesting, is that it kind of, I mean, it's very much connected to Google Mom. Cindy Crum has a fantastic deep dive into this on YouTube. I think it's something about mum, is that that's not the actual word for it, but the title has something. If you look up Cindy Crum mum, then you'll find that, the most recent one she did. And basically, she the gist of it is that essentially, like, Google is trying to, with mum, international, make information more fluid between languages. So so mum parses lots and lots of different languages, and like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It's worth 1,000 words in many languages though, right? Like, so if I took a picture of this, and let's say I didn't know the English word for microphone, like, and I'd say my phone was in, I don't know, Portuguese or Japanese, or I don't know, Swahili, whatever. You take a picture of it and they will tell me what it's called here. But if I was there and I wanted to take a picture, if I was in, I don't know, in Kenya or something, and I was speaking to someone who was Swahili, and I never met and I'd never seen this object, and I wanted to know what it was, I'd take a picture of it and they would tell it to me in my language. So it's very similar to like Latin names for like, flora and fauna, for instance. I might call it a cat, you might call it a gato, but the the Latin name for that is the same. And so that's essentially, like, Google can understand what the Latin name is for whatever picture you take, essentially, in that sort of long-winded thing. In my talk, it gets a lot more specific, and things. But yeah, I think visual search is super fascinating. The other thing I find really fascinating about it is that you are starting to see it in the SERP. So one of the main drivers for Google for visual search on Google is Vision AI. Interestingly enough, talking about Wix, one of the first things I noticed when I joined Wix was that Vision AI is baked into the Wix CMS. So as soon as you upload an image onto Wix, they generate tags. They give you the first 10 tags that Vision AI will see from your image. So if I took a picture of that butterfly, it would go like butterfly, insect, like wings, whatever, which I think is really awesome. But Vision AI parses lots of different information, and what you see when, like, so in my article, I did an example of Kia at the Staples Center. I had because I was using my own photos because of photo permission, and I have a picture from the Staples Center when I went to see the Lakers, back in the day, and Kia was sponsoring. And so I took a photo of Kia at the lake, or it was a general picture of the stadium, and it had a Kia sponsorship in it. Then when I Googled Kia sponsorship, and this happened the same time when I looked up Yankees Wix, because Wix used to sponsor the Yankees. That was another image permission thing. Basically, the first 2 of the top 5 images didn't have any text cues for the Kia query for Kia at the Staples Center. But they did have the Kia logo in an image of the Staples Center. So
Wow.
Google's parsing that image. When I did the Wix study, when I tested Wix, I tested Wix Yankee Stadium, and at the top there was tons of stuff about Wix Yankee Stadium.
Right.
We told everybody about it. Um, so there was tons of the kinds of stuff you would expect, like blogs about Wix at the Yankee Stadium, sponsoring the Yankees, blah blah blah. Further down the SERP, I found a bunch where, like, again, you could see the Wix logo in the Yankee Stadium, but there weren't any text cues. The article wasn't about Wix at the Yankee Stadium. It was just a picture of the batter with the Wix logo in the back, because Google is seeing those images and adding them into the SERP. And one of the other ones that I found was interesting was Giphy is also using Google's machine
Right.
image recognition software to generate tags for their GIFs.
Oh, that
So
makes
they
sense.
created a category for Wix.com based on the fact that they could see the logo in the image. So it's affecting the SERP. And I think that it's really important when you have, because there's so much machine learning going on and there's so much rapid change happening in the SERP, it's really important to check the SERP if you see big changes, big shifts, particularly in media-based queries, because so many things are happening so quickly right now. So if you're using your tools, then you might not see that. And it might not even make sense why one image has jumped up and another image hasn't, because you wrote a whole thing about Kia at the Staples Center. How come
Right.
your page for Kia at the Staples Center isn't showing? Well, you don't have a picture of Kia at the Staples Center, so it's not showing.
Right. Wow. Well, I
So
mean, this is like
yeah.
there's a lot to unpack there. Let me attempt a question here.
Sorry,
It's like,
I ramble so much.
no, that's like all of it was interesting. Like the one thing I can think about is like any of us who's been spending time in SEO have heard about Google making all these investments into AI and machine learning. And these are the sorts of products and insights that Google is hoping to capture with that investment. And so you have some, like, one of my favorite things, you have these really good examples of how Google can tell you're like, there's one you're taking a picture with exhibit, or you're at the Statue of Liberty and
Yes.
they know what this is, or Morty's with a Ghostbusters car, I think, in one of them. So, you had some really good examples, like some examples where it worked. How
Yeah,
did you have
absolutely.
to cut out anything? Were there some like ones where it failed? Does the AI work like almost 100% of the time in your experience?
So for all the examples, okay, so the Morty Overseen one, so I was showing different tools. So Google Lens is the one that everybody's talking about,
Right.
because Google's talking about that.
Yeah.
In the MozCon talk, I talked about how there's like 8 billion searches a month, or at least that's what they reported last time at Google I/O, via Google Lens. So if you are if you're trying to optimize things for search, you should definitely be looking at Google Lens and how that all works.
Right.
I used Morty's example to demonstrate Pinterest, because Pinterest has been in the visual
Okay.
search space for a long time.
Yeah.
So that one was interesting because it looked at the whole image. Obviously, I was focusing on the Ghostbusters mobile like logo, but it looked at the whole image, and the actual car for the Ghostbusters mobile is a hearse or an ambulance or something like that.
Right, yeah.
So some of the images that came back from Pinterest, some of them were Ghostbusters, some of them were like old school
Interesting.
ambulance hearse kind of
Yeah.
thing. So they were like, which one are you interested in? Exhibit I picked because he was the only famous person I had. So he was the only person I had within my own camera roll. Again, this is permissions. I've done enough public speaking to know that I cannot be asked with like trying to get photo permissions from random people. I didn't even get photo permission from my mom, whose Statue of Liberty picture I took from her Facebook page. I was just like, Mom, you're in my deck. Like, you're just in there.
Yeah. Right.
So I picked my own. So he was the only one that I had that was me. But what was interesting is that Google didn't recognize him as a knowledge panel. And to be fair, he hasn't. I'm not sure he's claimed his knowledge panel. Bing knew exactly who he was, but Google didn't know who he was. So on my example, I show his knowledge panel from Bing because Bing showed it. And Bing has a very, very good image recognition tool as well. Right. So you can drag and drop and pop it in there, and they have a lot of documentation about how they parse images and all that sort of stuff within their documentation. And Google Lens is really interesting. So some of the other examples I showed was how Google is using a lot of different data sets when they're thinking about understanding your image. So when they're using like the knowledge graph, so there's something like 8 billion entities or something on the knowledge graph, and I think it's 5 billion entities, 8 billion queries, 5 billion entities on the knowledge graph, and they're trying to parse, and they can sort of compare and contrast all of those. So one of the examples I gave was a super touristy photo of me next to the Space Shuttle Endeavour also in Los Angeles. This is a very LA.
Very LA.
I I am from LA, but like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'm next to the Space Shuttle Endeavour at the LA Science Museum, California Science Center, and my picture has me, big cheesy grin, and the space shuttle behind me. But my picture is pretty much exactly the same as the same image that you would find in the knowledge graph for the California Science Center. And so they're using the knowledge graph, like all those Wikipedia pages and stuff, and then they have their images and the image next to the Wikipedia page. They're using that sort of information. And speaking of permissions, shout out to Carl Hendy, who let me use his knowledge graph thing there as well. So with regards to, so that's one. I also talked about Google Business Profile.
Yes.
So those images that people post there, those are also being used as part of Google's image recognition. So I showed a photo of my burrito. They're talking about they have a Google search near me. So if I take a photo of a burrito, let's say I'm in, I don't know, let's say I'm in Austin or something, and I'm like, I know they got good burritos, I want a burrito. I take a photo of a burrito that I found on Instagram or something, and they can say, oh, that burrito's over here, that burrito's over there, that burrito's over there, based on what they have from the images in the knowledge or in Google Business Profile. Also, it's my understanding. It's from what I can see, Google is using the Explore panel within or what I can see is Google's using similar information within the image of Google Photos. The way that they parse Google Photos is very similar to the way that they parse images. So within Google Photos, if you go to the Explore tab, you can see the entities that they understand from your images within your Google Photos. So cool. So for instance, I gave an example in my Twitter thread for Moz about Brandenburg. I think it's Brandenburg Platz in Berlin. It's like a big gate thing. It's like a touristy place. And Brandenburg Gate. And in my Google Photos, if I search Berlin, it shows up for that. If I search Brandenburg Gate, it shows up for that. If I search, I think it's in I think it's called Parser Place. People from Berlin are going to be like, you are mangling these names. But it's in like a wider square. If I search the name for the wider square, then it also shows up for that. What's also interesting is that there's other things within my own image, the own images that I have in my camera roll, and like really, I highly encourage you to look and see what kinds of entities Google's understanding from your own camera roll. There was like dog, flower, rainbow, and if you look up rock, that's a fun one because I live in a bouldery place and in California there's a lot of boulders, and so there's photos of boulders, folders of random rock piles that I've made with my kid, and also there's a few photos of rock concerts, which is interesting. So Google's trying to figure out like which one is it, like in the same way that Pinterest was. Is it this rock? Is it that rock? And this also helps you understand like why, like when you're talking about entities, you also need to contextualize them. So like rock concert, like that makes a big difference in like the kinds of images that you'll see. Like another one was cone. I looked up cone and I found in my images, and I found like a traffic cone. I found an ice cream cone. And I also found a conical shaped statue that was within my image collection. So again, if you wrote something like cones come in lots of different sizes and can be found outside, that applies to all of them, right? Yeah. So you need to have like the context. So if I said ice cream cone, that would be different. If I said sweet cone, nobody would ever say that, but if you're adding in those additional context, the traffic cone, that makes a big difference. Yeah. And I think with regards to machine learning, the first time that penny dropped for me was like goggles. I had to do some PPC for goggles, and I think PPC is a really good place to see how, because Google's like using machine learning all over PPC, like all in there. And I think I had to do something on goggles for a swimwear or for a swimming company. And I was like, cool, we'll like set up some like, machine learning ads for goggles, and we'll just let that run and it'll be awesome. And they came back and had been serving all these ads to like all kinds of stuff. And I had not done the negative keywords. And when I went in there, it was like safety goggles, beer goggles, ski goggles, steampunk goggles, like all these. And I was like,
Oh
I
my
didn't even
gosh.
consider all of those goggles. But yeah, you have to think about the different kinds of things that will change, what one entity means to what another one does.
Wow. Well, that's a very good answer. You're very good at the examples, like the cone and the other thing. So rock and everything like that. Those are good examples. So, like one of the things I appreciate the distinction that you made. So there's like a very important distinction between image search and visual search, that those separate those two things in your head because they're not the same. But then that seems like kind of a significant challenge for SEOs because we can kind of like do things with images, but if Google is understanding real life, which is the point in your presentation, that Google is now beginning to understand real life, how does a marketer take advantage of that? One of the things that you
Yeah.
suggest is like, this is a branding challenge. How can you optimize branding in real life? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. So I'm wearing, this is actually very apt. I'm wearing a Lakers t-shirt with a Lakers logo on it. Logos are a really, really good way to do that. For instance, Google can recognize logos, and logos are actually in some ways better than just words with regards to visuals, because they will recognize the shape and the color and the context of it. So for instance, if you have like the swoop, they recognize that that's Nike. You don't even have to write Nike underneath of it. They recognize that it's Nike, and they will attach that to the knowledge graph for Nike. Not just the words Nike, because that's also a Greek god, if I remember correctly. And there's lots of different things there. I give an example. So with regards to that, and I talk about this in my article as well. As a marketer, there are things that you can do. So one is claim your knowledge graph if you have one. And number two is making sure that you have your logo clearly articulated online. And this should be the same exact logo that you're using IRL. So the example I gave, so you talked about that picture of me with Exhibit. I met him at an airport years ago, and I was like, I want a selfie with Exhibit. So I get a selfie with Exhibit, and I don't realize, but there's a logo for Pete's Coffee behind me. And Pete's Coffee, if you don't know, is a coffee chain on the West Coast. And, they've been going since 1966, and they've never changed their logo. Their logo is the same. And I looked at Pete's Coffee. I was like, that's interesting. And if you Google Pete's Coffee, they are a masterclass in rock solid IRL branding. Basically, they have the same logo on everything. And when you Google Pete's Coffee, what you get is like logo on the coffee, logo on the coffee cups, like logo on the sign, logo on the outside sign, logo on the door, and it's all the same. And this helps Google to understand that you're the same, and that's how they recognize Pete's Coffee in that image. They were like, yeah, that's Pete's Coffee. That's exactly who that is. They know who that is. And if I went to their knowledge graph, and it was the same logo. And so like on their knowledge graph, it should be the same. On your structured data on your website, they ask you to declare your logo, and that's one of the, Google doesn't give you all of the rich results information in Search Console, but they do give you information on your logo. That should absolutely be on your website. They also ask you for your logo explicitly in Google Merchant Center. Wow. And they also ask you for like all of the color schemes and stuff within Google Merchant Center. They also ask you for that business information just generally when you're doing ads. And they also ask you to declare your logo in Google Business Profile. There are lots of places where you can declare your logo. They should all be the same. And they should all be the same as the ones that's on your IRL space. So marketers can do that, but marketers will need to work with branding people as well. And they should apply all the time. So again with logos, I took an example of a friend who had gone to, she sent me a picture of her dinner, right? Like, because we're millennials and that's what we do. And I was like, oh, I'm going to test this near me thing. And I tested it, and I didn't even realize, but the plate had a tiny little logo for the restaurant in the top. Kidding. Wow. And Google picked that up and was like, oh, that's this restaurant in South London. And I was like, cool. Like, that's awesome. I didn't even think about that. But these are like little things that you can do that will actually have an impact. So I think it's really important to think about, as a marketer, if you're trying to understand visual search, it's really worth doing some research, just like you would do keyword research. Have a look at the kinds of photos that people are taking of you. People tag you on pictures on Instagram. People upload photos onto your Facebook page. People are uploading photos on TripAdvisor. You know, people on LinkedIn are sharing photos when they visit your office. What are they taking photos of? And is there a way where you can make it like distinct for your company? So one of the examples that I gave was a local business that I know, and it's a small hairdressers, and they went really super girly. They do like lashes and nails and hair extensions and like all of that super fun stuff. And they made it super pink with lots of flowers and all this sort of thing. They put they set up like it's like really Instagrammable, and they use it all over Instagram, and they put it in their Google business profile. I took that same picture, I put it into search, and Google was like, yeah, that's this business. They're not a giant business. They're not enormous. You know, they're not Nike. They're not Reebok. Reebok. You know, they're not like some huge organization. They're a small business, but because they made sure that image was in their Google business profile, which, you know, also helps define you more clearly as an entity. Like these sorts of things, these are the things that you can do to make sure that they work well. And also you can encourage people. So, you know, when you see there's like wings on the side, and people can come and take a picture with the wings, or you see there's like, you know, where someone will declare like a space, like a scenic viewpoint. Those are things that can help you in visual search. So, you know, I gave an example in my write-up for Moz about, like, I took a super touristy photo, again, because I'm a tourist, outside the Excalibur Hotel in Las Vegas, because I'm a classy girl. Yeah, and I took this picture, right? And I took this picture, and it's the same picture everybody takes, right? Everybody takes a picture of the same thing. So, and I'm like, if you know that people are doing that, just tell people like, this is the photo place. Just put a little sign on it. Right. And then you'll know what's going to be in the shot when people take the photo. And what was interesting about the Excalibur photo is that I didn't realize when I looked at the photo, but when I searched it, there's a little character. They've painted somebody in a wall. I don't know, he's like a gargoyle or something, but they've painted him in the corner of the castle thing. And so if you search an image of it, Google can see that little face, and they know that's definitely Excalibur because they can see that. I didn't realize that was the case, but and I'm sure they didn't optimize it for visual search, but it's doing them a favor anyway.
Wow, that's awesome.
So yeah.
So I love it. So
yeah, it's really fascinating.
So the takeaway is encourage user, you know, like not just user generated content that's written, but like visual user generated content, and that there will be wins there. I love this. So. Well, Crystal, like I've loved this conversation. I would love to continue it, but we're short on time. I want to make sure if people want to reach out to you or learn more about Wix and everything you guys have going on there, especially the new hub, how do they connect with you? What's your favorite social media? What's the best way to get in touch?
So I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter far too much. And my Twitter handle is Crystal on the web. And the Wix SEO the Wix SEO Hub is at wix.com/SEO/learn. And we've got lots of resources. We're publishing new stuff all the time. And yeah, do tune in there to find new cool stuff. Well, I am a big fan. I will be tuning in. I'm going to give you a virtual cheers for now. And we'll be back next week for everybody else with another episode of Suds Search. Thanks so much, Crystal. Thank you very much.